Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Rain fell gently on the clinic windows, tracing silver lines across the glass. Inside, the monotonous ticking of the clock seemed to swallow up every second. Dr. James Carter, a physician of 20 years, thought he'd seen it all, until now. A little girl entered, her face hidden behind a strand of black hair, her eyes filled with unspeakable fear. She said nothing. She couldn't. She never spoke. But in her trembling hand, a small, crumpled piece of paper told a story her mouth refused to pronounce. When Dr. Carter unfolded the note, a cold shiver ran down his spine. The words were simple, almost naive, but their weight was unbearable. Someone is hurting me at home. I don't dare speak. Please help me. He knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. That silence, that silent courage, resonated louder than any scream. The little girl, fragile and alone, had just broken through the darkness of a world she had endured for too long. And Dr. Carter knew he had to act, before it was too late. The clock ticked again. But for the first time, every second seemed to count more. The little girl's name was Emily. 8 years old. Her dark hair framed a thin face where every invisible scar was visible in her eyes. She lived in a house that looked like an ordinary home from the outside, with its well-tended garden and carefully painted white shutters. But behind those walls, the air was heavy, laden with fear and secrets. Emily paced across the cold kitchen floor. Her mother was away, always immersed in her own problems, and her father, he was there, but he knocked more often than he liked. Emily had learned to become invisible, to speak as little as possible, to hide in the dark corners of the house to escape the loud voices and sudden gestures. Every day was a challenge. Every breath had to be measured. Every silence, protected. But that morning, something inside her had changed. She had found the strength to confide, even if it was only through writing. At school, Emily was quiet but attentive. Her classmates almost never noticed her, and that was exactly what she wanted. But today, the weight of the secret she was carrying had become too heavy. Fear was no longer enough to keep her locked in silence. So when the doctor called her into his office, she felt this was her chance. A chance to speak without speaking, to scream without shouting, to ask for help without her lips moving. The small piece of paper she handed Dr. Carter was her last breath of courage. The doctor, reading the note, understood that the situation was critical. He had to act quickly, but he knew that every step had to be taken with caution. The child was in danger, and every minute counted. Emily sat on the chair, staring at the floor. She didn't need words. Her eyes said it all: fear, hope, and that fragile but determined cry for help that would soon change her life. Dr. Carter got back into his car, the small piece of paper still clutched in his hand. Every word Emily said echoed in his mind: someone is hurting me at home. He knew the urgency to act, but he also knew he had to be strategic. One false step could make the little girl's situation worse. He decided to start by discreetly observing Emily's house. Located on a quiet street, with neighbors who seemed to live in their own world, the house gave nothing away of the horror it harbored. But Dr. Carter had learned to read between the lines: the slightly closed windows, the rarely opened shutters, the doorbell that no longer worked. All these details indicated that something was wrong. The next day, the doctor contacted social services and the local police, describing the situation cautiously but firmly. He insisted that the child's life could be in immediate danger. Meanwhile, Emily returned home from school, unaware that the outside world was beginning to move to protect her. Inside, the tension was palpable. Her father, drunk or angry, was banging on the walls of the house again, rattling the dishes in the kitchen. Emily, curled up on the couch, held back tears. Each blow resonated in her chest like a war drum she could neither stop nor ignore. For the first time, she knew her silent plea had found an echo. Someone had heard her silent cry. But fear was still there, lurking in every corner, and she didn't yet know if she would be brave enough to face what came next. Dr. Carter, for his part, began to prepare a discreet plan of action. He knew that direct intervention could be dangerous, but he could wait no longer. Emily had reached out to him, and he had to respond. Dr. Carter knocked softly on the door of Emily's house, his heart pounding. He knew every second counted, but he had to remain calm and measured so as not to alert his father. The door slowly opened, revealing a hard-faced man with eyes shot through with fatigue and anger. "Hello, I'm Dr. Carter," he began in a calm voice. The man looked at him suspiciously. "What do you want?" "It's about Emily, your daughter." At these words, a flicker of nervousness crossed the father's eyes. Dr. Carter sensed the urgency and fear in the house, but he kept his voice soft and reassuring. "I want to make sure she's okay. I'm worried about her." The father snorted, a harsh, cruel sound. "Worried about her? You have no business being here. She's my daughter, and I'll handle this." Dr. Carter felt an electric shock. He knew danger was imminent, but he had to remain calm. "I understand, but Emily gave me this." He gently held out the small piece of paper the girl had written. The man paled slightly as he read the words. His fingers trembled, but he quickly regained his angry mask. "It's nothing. She's just scared for nothing." Dr. Carter knew he had to act quickly. He discreetly called social services to begin an immediate investigation while he searched for an excuse to enter the house without provoking a violent reaction. Meanwhile, Emily, hiding behind a door, watched the scene. Her heart was pounding. She knew this moment could be dangerous, but she felt a glimmer of hope. Someone, for the first time, was taking her words seriously. Someone was finally going to help her. Dr. Carter took a deep breath and said softly, "I'm here for her, to help you, but I can't do it alone." His eyes met Emily's, which shone with a mixture of fear and relief. A few minutes later, there was a more authoritative knock at the door. Social services officers were standing there, accompanied by a discreet but attentive police officer. Emily's father instinctively stepped back, his hands tightening on the doorframe. "Sir, we've received a report regarding Emily's safety," the officer announced calmly. "We need to make sure she's safe." The father burst into anger. "You have no rights here. This house is mine." He tried to close the door, but the officer held it firmly. The tension rose instantly, like a storm about to burst. Emily, hiding behind the stairs, felt her fear rising, but also a strange strength. For the first time, she wasn't alone. The words she had written, her silent plea, had set off a chain of events that might just save her. Dr. Carter stepped forward, his voice firm but gentle. "We don't want to punish you. We just want to protect Emily. She needs a safe place." The father yelled furiously, but the officers remained calm. One of them reached out to Emily, who hesitated for a moment before slipping into the officers. She could feel her heart beating so hard it felt like it might explode, but there was a reassuring warmth in that outstretched hand. With her father kept at bay, Emily realized her life was about to change forever. The house she had always feared was no longer a sanctuary for fear, but the scene of her liberation. Dr. Carter, watching the little girl walk away safely, felt a mixture of relief and worry. The worst might be yet to come, but for the first time, he knew Emily had a chance. And outside, the rain continued to fall, gently washing away the fear and allowing a glimpse of fragile but real hope. Emily moved into a temporary home provided by social services. The house, though simple, felt strangely warm after years spent in fear. The walls were painted in soft colors, and toys were scattered around the living room. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt she could breathe. The staff at the home, aware of her situation, welcomed her gently. A woman named Mrs. Langston showed her to her room and sat beside her, patient and attentive. "You're safe here, Emily. No one will hurt you." The little girl nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. For the first time, she felt she could be herself, even if only a little. Dr. Carter continued to monitor her case closely. He visited the home regularly, making sure Emily had everything she needed. He let her speak at her own pace, without pressure, and gently encouraged her to write about her feelings, her fears, but also her hopes. Writing had become a form of therapy for her, a way to name her emotions and regain some semblance of control over her life. Despite this new, safe environment, memories of her previous home haunted Emily. Every unexpected noise, every creaking door, reminded her of the terror she had experienced. But over time, she began to smile shyly, to laugh softly, and to regain some of the innocence that had been stolen from her. One evening, as Emily was writing in her notebook, Dr. Carter sat down beside her. "You know, Emily, you're very brave. Few children would have had the courage to speak out, even in writing." Emily looked up at him and smiled a small smile. For the first time, she understood that courage wasn't just about surviving fear, but also about sharing it with someone who could help. And that night, for the first time in a long time, Emily fell asleep without fear, leaving behind the weight of shadows and welcoming a future that was still fragile, but full of promise. As the weeks passed, Emily began to settle into her new life at home. Mornings were no longer filled with fear, but with a gentle, predictable routine. The children at home, initially wary of her shyness, gradually began to accept her. A little girl named Mia, the same age as Emily, became her first friend. Mia had a bright smile and an infectious laugh, capable of piercing the silence surrounding Emily. "Do you want to play and draw?" she asked one afternoon, handing Emily a pencil. Emily hesitated, but eventually agreed. The two girls spent hours drawing imaginary houses, trees of improbable colors, and fantastical characters. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt her imagination come alive again, and with it, a sense of normalcy she thought lost forever. Dr. Carter continued his regular visits. He watched Emily progress, slowly but surely. He encouraged her to write down her stories and feelings, which helped her express what she didn't dare say aloud. Each word on paper was a victory over the past and a testament to her resilience. Yet despite this newfound stability, the memory of her father and the home she had left remained. Some nights, she would wake with a start, her heart pounding, and need the reassuring presence of Mrs. Langston or Dr. Carter to fall back asleep. One afternoon, as Emily was writing in her notebook, she looked up and whispered to Mia, "Do you think we can really be happy after everything we've been through?" Mia smiled and took his hand. "Yes. Because now we're not alone anymore. And friends, they always help." Emily realized that even though her past remained a shadow, she could now build a future where fear no longer dictated her life. She was no longer alone, and every small connection she formed with others became a shield against the darkness that had long surrounded her. Over time, Emily began to feel safe enough to speak out, well, to try. Dr. Carter had suggested she tell her story, step by step, first in writing, then quietly. Every word was difficult, every memory painful, but she knew it was the only way to release the burden she had been carrying for years. One afternoon in the common room of the home, Emily took a deep breath and, in a shaky voice, recounted her experiences with her father. The words came out with difficulty, but Dr. Carter and Mrs. Langston listened attentively, without judgment, with patience and compassion. He was always yelling, and sometimes he hit me," she said finally, her voice breaking with emotion. "I thought no one could help me." Dr. Carter gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were incredibly brave, Emily. You're safe now. No one will be able to hurt you again." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but this time they were different. They weren't just fear or pain, they were the beginning of healing. As the weeks passed, Emily began to write more about her past, transforming her painful memories into stories she could share with the other children in the home. Her stories became a way to free herself from fear and understand that her courage was not only to survive, but also to tell. One evening, as she finished a page in her notebook, Emily realized something: she was no longer afraid to look back. Every word written, every confession, every tear shed helped her rebuild her inner strength. The ghost of her father was still present in her memories, but he no longer controlled her present. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt fear begin to give way to hope. She understood that her road to recovery would be long and difficult, but that she was no longer alone, and that the support of others could transform her pain into strength. As the months passed, Emily began to thrive in the home. The walls that had once felt oppressive were now filled with laughter and light. She had found her place among the other children and, more importantly, she had begun to regain her self-confidence. She discovered a passion for drawing and painting. Each color, each stroke, allowed her to express what she dared not say aloud. Her drawings told stories of courage, freedom, and dreams of a better world. Educators and Dr. Carter were impressed by her talent and encouraged her to continue. Emily also made close friends, including Mia and a boy named Lucas, who shared her love of books and fantasy stories. Together, they created imaginary worlds where fear did not exist, where children were the heroes of their own adventures. These moments became emotional refuges for Emily, places where she could finally be herself. But healing wasn't without challenges. Sometimes Emily had nightmares, reawakening the fear that seemed to want to return. During those nights, Dr. Carter came to comfort her, reminding her that she was safe and that her past could no longer harm her. These simple but consistent gestures gave her the courage to continue. One afternoon, Emily presented her drawings at an exhibition held in the children's home. Her works, full of color and symbols of freedom, deeply touched the visitors. Dr. Carter looked at her with pride. "See, Emily. Your courage isn't just about surviving. It's about inspiring others." For the first time, Emily felt she could look to the future with hope. The wounds of her past were still there, but they no longer defined who she was. She had learned that resilience and the support of others could transform fear into strength, and that every step toward the light, no matter how small, was a victory. A few months later, Emily's father was summoned by authorities as part of an investigation into the reported abuse. Emily, accompanied by Dr. Carter and Mrs. Langston, went to court for the pretrial hearing. She felt a mixture of fear and determination. This was a crucial moment, finally facing her past and asserting her new life. Sitting on the bench, Emily watched her father from across the room. He was pale and nervous, unable to meet her gaze. The silence in the room weighed heavily, but Emily felt strangely calm. She was no longer the trembling little girl he had terrorized. She had allies, protections, and, above all, an inner strength he had never been able to break. The judge, a stern but fair woman, addressed Emily's father. "Sir, you are here to answer for the abuse and neglect of your daughter. She deserves safety and protection." Emily, though silent, looked up at him. His gaze was filled not with fear but with defiance. She knew that the words she had been unable to speak earlier now spoke for her, the truth of what she had suffered, her pain and her courage. Dr. Carter, sitting beside her, gently took her hand. "You are brave, Emily. And now you have the power to protect yourself." The hearing was conducted with professionalism and gravity. The evidence was overwhelming, the testimony consistent. The father, confronted with his actions, could no longer deny or manipulate reality. Emily felt a strange liberation. Finally, the weight of constant anxiety was beginning to lift. At the end of the day, the judge rendered his decision. Emily would remain in the care of the home and Dr. Carter until her safety and well-being were fully assured. Her father would be monitored and disciplined according to the law. For Emily, that day marked not only a legal victory, but also a symbolic one. She had confronted her past, confronted the man who had instilled fear in her life, and asserted her right to a free and secure future. The seasons had changed since Emily's arrival home. The cold of winter had given way to the vibrant flowers of spring, and with it, Emily had begun to bloom as well. Every morning, she awoke with renewed energy, ready to explore, learn, and dream. Emily spent her days between school, community activities, and creative art. Her drawings and paintings became a way to express her newfound joy, but also to share her courage with other children. Mia and Lucas remained her constant companions, and together they invented stories full of magic and endless possibilities. Dr. Carter continued to monitor her progress, but he knew Emily no longer needed his constant protection. She had found within herself the strength and resilience that had always been within her, and those around her had helped her reveal it. One afternoon, Emily took to the foyer's small stage at a children's exhibition and presented her work. The visitors, touched by the depth and emotion of her creations, warmly congratulated her. Emily smiled, a real smile this time, without fear or restraint. She knew her past no longer defined her. Walking back to her room that evening, Emily placed her notebook on the desk and looked at herself in the mirror. The shy, mute little girl she had been now seemed far behind her. She felt free, able to speak, to dream, and to choose her own life. Before falling asleep, she whispered in a low voice, "I am free, and I am going to be happy." The evening light bathed the room, soft and warm, as if to seal her rebirth. Emily had broken through the darkness and discovered her own strength. Her story was no longer just one of fear and pain, but one of courage, hope, and resilience. And for the first time in a long time, she knew that each new day could be filled with endless possibilities.